Does anybody have the book to hold up?
Yeah, I do.
Awesome. We'll take our screenshot first.
I think Jess is at a meeting today.
Yeah, that's what she said.
Hey,
Hi.
Hey.
I'm trying to see if I'm too dark here. Hold on a second. Let me adjust this blind.
That's better.
Okay, you can see me now.
Yes. Hi. Happy Sunday. Thanks for being with us.
No problem. How are you all?
We are good.
Good.
We really enjoyed this book, so we're excited to talk about it. We'll start with our picture really fast and then we'll dive right in.
Okay.
Thank you for being with us, David. All right, guys, ready? 1, 2, 3. Perfect.
I like that cover, by the way. It's a nice cover art.
Yeah, they did a great job. I had nothing to do with it whatsoever, but it did turn out well. I agree. I also didn't pick the title of the book, but you know, what can you do?
What was your title?
Well, when I first wrote the book and turned it in, it was called There Is a Light That Never Goes Out, which is the name of a Smith song. and that is in the book. The Smith song is in the book.
Right.
And it's about a car accident. And so I liked that title. But then they told me they were going to change the title. And they said that the title of the book was going to be It's Always the Boyfriend. So I thought that was the name of the book. And then one day they sent me this image, and it said, and it was that cover, and it was So She's Gone by David Bell. And I thought, what is this? Why are they sending this to me? Do they have another author named David Bell who's written a book called She's Gone? Like, why are they showing me this? And I said, oh, this is nice. What is this? And they said, well, that's the name of your book now. And that's what the cover is going to look like. So it became She's Gone.
That's bizarre.
Without me having anything to do with it. Yes.
That's so bizarre, really, that they did that.
Yeah.
So this was your first YA book. Were there any challenges to that or anything that you felt was just different in your process from normally writing like your adult book?
The actual writing of the book wasn't any different. I had an outline, and it was all kind of the same in that way. The big challenge was just to remember that this was the mindset of a 17-year-old. This was the point of view of a 17-year-old. That, when I first wrote the book, I went back through it, and there were places where he sounded like a middle-aged person, right? Not that I'm middle-aged, but there were places where he sounded like a middle-aged person, and I had to go through and remove those places. And it wasn't so much that he would speak in teen slang or anything like that, because that would be too hard to keep up with, and that could date the book, farther down the road anyway. So it wasn't really about him necessarily using, slang that young people use now, as much as just not sounding like an adult, and keeping in mind that he had the concerns of a 17-year-old and he had the perspective of a 17-year-old. So that was really the big thing, was just to make sure I was doing justice to a 17-year-old as opposed to someone, who's ancient like I am.
Well, we were actually talking about this before we got started, and we all thought that you captured an adolescent voice, and I'm thinking that would be extremely difficult to do.
Well, I mean, I've had in other books of mine, I've had point of view characters who were teenagers. So I've done it before. It was just never that the whole book was from a teenager's point of view, and it was never that a teenager was the protagonist. So I've done that before. Um, what I found and what I found maybe over the last couple of years, but especially writing this book, She's Gone, and I've already written the next young adult book that I have coming out. It's not finished, but I've written the early drafts of it and all that, is that, and again, I don't know if it's that I've gotten older or what, but I just have a clearer perspective on being young now. I think being young, being a teenager, that's a very vivid time in everybody's lives. So you do remember it. You remember school, you remember high school, you remember your family. So that's always vivid. But as I've gotten older, I seem to have a clearer perspective on it or a different perspective on it. So even though more time has passed, it's easier to tap into some of those memories and feelings that I haven't really thought about in a long time, if that makes any kind of sense. I mean, part of it is, so for the next book that hasn't come out yet, that's YA, it was more direct. The relationship between the main character and his parents in the book is more directly based on my parents. And so I don't know if I was able to tap into that more because, like, I mean, my dad has been dead for 12 years and my mom is ancient. And I don't know if it's just like as they've gotten older and or died, I have a different perspective on them and then I'm able to remember better what it was like to be 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So it's just kind of been a weird thing that I just found some of those memories and feelings more readily available to me than I thought they would be.
That's interesting.
I heard in an interview that you had some inspiration for this book based on the private school that you got a scholarship to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've never had the experience in the book that Hunter has when he goes to school and everybody thinks he's murdered his girlfriend and he doesn't even know what's happened to her. And he feels very alienated and he feels like the whole town has turned against him. He's publicly called out. Have you all read the book? So
Oh,
spoilers are
yes,
okay.
we've
Oh,
we
okay.
finished.
Okay. So like when he goes to the candlelight vigil and gets called out publicly, that would be awful to happen to anybody, but when you're a teenager, you really are, I think, even more sensitive to being publicly embarrassed, humiliated, feeling alone, feeling alienated, and all that. So I've never experienced what Hunter experienced. I was not accused of murder in high school, right? But when I grew up, my family didn't have a lot of money. I grew up in Cincinnati, which is a big city, and Cincinnati is a very Catholic city. So if you're Catholic, you go to a Catholic high school, and all the Catholic schools are single gender. So like it's girls go to some schools and boys go to other schools. Um, and I don't know what they're going to do about that going forward. But for when I was going to school, it was boys and girls, and it was separate. And so the best all boys Catholic high school was St. Xavier, and it was the rich kids' school. And it was far away. It was like 40 minutes from where I lived. And I never thought that I would go to that school. I didn't think we could afford it. I didn't think it was a place I would go. But I took the entrance exam and got a scholarship, partially need, partially academic. And I went to school there, but I felt like an alien there. I felt like it was so far from home. I didn't know a lot of people there. It felt like everybody there was rich. It's not true that everybody there was rich. There were a number of kids who were there on financial aid packages like I was, but the perception was everybody's rich, everybody knows everybody, everybody's having fun, everybody's doing things, and I'm the alien who's just wandering through the hallways and no one, and I don't know anybody and I don't fit in. Again, that's the way a lot of people feel in high school. But I think that alienation, that sense of feeling like everybody's turned against you, I channeled that into the book in terms of Hunter's experience of basically having a lot of people turn against him and only his family and a couple of his friends hang with him through the whole thing.
And also, it's Daniel, right, who is a aspiring filmmaker, who is such a wonderful character. He had all that alienation too. He was seen, even though he was obviously a very interesting and an empathetic person and very creative, yet not really that much appreciated or known about in high school for what he was.
Yeah, and I thought that also was kind of a universal experience that you can have someone who's a really close friend at one part of your life, like when you're in grade school, and then, friendships, we change and friendships change. And that, I mean, that certainly happened to me when I was going through my adolescence and schooling, where there were friends who part of it was because I went to different schools than a lot of people. So that was one thing, but you just grow in different directions, and it's not a fight or anything, but you just evolve in different ways. And so I thought that was kind of a universal experience, that Hunter's in school and he has a new set of friends in high school and a girlfriend, and then his friend who he grew up with, they're not the same kind of friends anymore. And then it's kind of awkward when you see each other and you don't, and then, so that's part of what I liked about Daniel, was that I thought that represented that whole experience that we can have growing up.
Who was your favorite character to develop, and who was the most challenging?
I mean, the most challenging were the bad people, right?
I was very surprised. So then my follow-up question is, did you know how this was going to end? Because I felt like we're leading us down a path, or I felt led down a path that Ron was creepy and kidnapped Chloe. Like my whole time, I'm like, Ron has Chloe in the basement. Like he literally has Chloe in the basement, is just what I was like certain of.
Me
And then I
too.
was like, oh, Chloe's not in Ron's basement, is what you realize in the end. It's far,
Yeah.
far worse.
So that it's always difficult to write the bad people, right? Because you don't want it to be obvious that they're bad, and you don't want them to be stereotypically bad. So Ron, who ends up being a bad guy, that's something that happens to us, I think, when we grow up too, is that we can have a lot of admiration for an adult, for a teacher. We can think they're so great. Hunter worships Ron because they're in the creative writing club, and Ron is a poet who's published a book and all that stuff. And so you can just think like, oh, this guy is so great, right? I want to be like him. I admire him. I want his attention, right? And then you find out that the person you've put on a pedestal is not the person you thought he was. That is just part of growing up. Actually, it's part of adulthood too, but it really hits hard when you're growing up. So that was the thing with Ron, is that Ron was that kind of person. There was the scene when, after he gets caught, when Olivia says, oh, the guy was always a phony, he was so fake, some people can see it and some people can't see that. So that was the thing about Ron. And then Chloe's parents, again, I didn't want them to seem like obviously bad people. I thought throughout the book, what we saw of them publicly, they were acting the way grieving, distraught parents would act, especially Chloe's mother, who we find out didn't know what was going on.
That's what I was thinking. I think you did a really good job with that, because Chloe's mom, I totally felt like would be a grieving mom, lost her daughter, how heartbreaking. And then Chloe's father always gave me the heebie-jeebies for some reason. I'm like, there just were those moments that I think you captured him so well, but it was just enough to leave us unsettled, in my opinion, where I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think he's done it, but
right.
He makes me uncomfortable and I can't pinpoint why.
Well, I mean, the things that we don't see him do much. He's out at the roadside memorial the one day. You might go out to the roadside memorial if you cared. I mean, Hunter's there, so why wouldn't her dad be there?
Yeah.
At the candlelight vigil, he he kind of is in the role of support. He's being more supportive to his wife and being a little bit of the calmer one
Right.
when his wife is expressing her emotion. Again, relationships can be that way. One person can be more demonstrative than the other person. So those kinds of things that he did, I don't think were that suspicious. When Gabriella goes to the door and reports that he made a comment like, well, he said something like, we have to accept what might happen or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it, but again, somebody might say like, well, you have to be prepared for anything. Or he might know where his daughter is, as you find out later. So they were tougher to pull off because they were grieving parents. Even her father was a grieving parent. He didn't mean to do what happened. That happened because he was, it grew out of his desire to protect his daughter. That when he found the diary and he freaked out and he was going after Ron, right? So anyway, their situation is a little more complicated than Ron's, who's just a creep trying to take advantage of young people. So that's always the hard part, is to make people not obviously suspicious to some extent, especially with the parents. You can understand why they behaved the way they behaved. What was the other part? Characters who I enjoyed writing, or
Yes. Who was the most
I mean,
challenging and who was your favorite to
I
develop?
mean, Olivia was just fun to write because she said whatever she thought, right? And in that family dynamic, Hunter, their father, is a very like reserved, quiet guy who doesn't like to talk about anything. Hunter is a little more reserved. He's not as reserved as his dad, but he's a little less comfortable with like the public displays of emotion and all that. So to have someone in the house who says whatever crosses their mind is the one who says what needs to be said, like when she said that about Ron, like, oh, he was such a phony when he read his poem at the assembly and all that. Or when Olivia was pushing them to do something, don't just sit here and take it. Don't just sit here and let people say whatever they want to say about you. To me, she was a fun character to write, but also an interesting character because she, like I said, she was the one who was the truth teller and was saying the stuff that other people weren't saying out loud.
I like their relationship between the brother and sister. It's nice to have a book where the brother and sister have that kind of relationship.
Yeah, I was thinking about this recently. Again, I'm the youngest child. I'm not the older child like Hunter is, so I don't have any younger siblings. I have two older siblings, and it is interesting that, like I said, so over the last couple of years, we've been dealing with all this stuff with my mom. My mom had to move into a nursing home, and so it was all that stuff about like, we got, can we get mom out of the house? Who's going to tell mom she has to move? We've done all that stuff. And my siblings and I, we don't have a lot in common. So like we don't have the sibling relationship where we're always calling each other on the phone and hanging out and whatever. We're not like that, but the stuff with dealing with my mom and everything, we've had to talk a lot. And it's just an interesting dynamic that like the bond that exists, whether you're consciously aware of it or not, between siblings, and that when you find yourself in a crisis, how many people in the world can you count on? How many people are there for you no matter what? It doesn't have to be your siblings, but I mean, at least in my case, I can count on my siblings. And this whole thing, as difficult as it has been to go through this stuff with my mom, I feel closer to them than I've ever felt before because we've had something to talk about and to share and everything. So all of that is a roundabout way of saying that sibling dynamic, when those two kids don't really have that much in common, when Olivia could be perceived as just a pest to her older brother, but when push comes to shove, she's the one who stands by him and protects him and like punches the lacrosse player and goes to the house with him and does all that stuff for him because that's how close they are.
I think this scene in the closet with Hunter being in the closet and the parents being in the room was probably one of my favorite and one of the most intense. Like
Mhm.
the whole time I was sitting there and I was like, when she's about, mom's about to open the door basically, and then
Mm-hmm.
Chloe's dad distracts her and's like, with whatever he says. I'm like, but that moment when he is in the closet and he has found the diary, I'm like, I was just sitting there kind of like on the edge of my seat. That was probably one of my favorite
Yeah,
moments.
that was like the turning point for me, like the point where I really just couldn't put the book down and I wanted to finish that day. I had to know what happened next. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good scene because it was Hunter doing something to try to solve this mystery, right? Something pretty reckless. You shouldn't go into other
mhm.
people's homes. And if he got caught, it would make him look really guilty and strange that he was going into the house that way. But I liked the three of them, Hunter, Olivia, and Gabriella, working together to do it. I thought that was fun that the three of them were like this little investigatory team going and
Yeah.
breaking into the house together. I liked them working together in that way.
I did too, and it felt believable again that like a kid would do that. Just like the YouTube videos that like had me cringing and shaking my head when Hunter's recording, basically. I get
Mm-hmm.
it, but I'm like, oh, we don't do that. I'm like, that makes you look so guilty, buddy. And you just kept making them and making them. I'm like, you gotta stop, kid.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, nobody knows how to act when they're in an extraordinary situation like that. But I mean, it is true that when we're young, we have even less
Yeah.
impulse control, and if we think we need to do something, we do it, um, even if it is only going to make the situation worse. And we don't always listen to our parents, even when they have our best interests in mind. I can certainly remember that part of adolescence. So yeah, all those things that Hunter was doing were getting reckless, but he was desperate.
Mhm.
Did you know how this was going to end? Did it change? Did it evolve?
I did know how it was going to end. I originally thought that this was originally an idea for an adult book, um, and the main character would be about 28, and this would have happened to him when he was 18, and he's left his hometown and he's gone off, and had written a book about his girlfriend, the unsolved disappearance of his girlfriend in high school. And he'd written a book and he'd come back to the town to promote the book. And everybody in the town thought he was guilty. And when he came back, having written a book, he got called out. He did a book signing at the library or whatever. And that's when the girlfriend's mother shows up and calls him out for trying to profit off of her disappearance, and that he's guilty. And his friend was still going to be making the documentary and all that. But I thought all the interesting stuff was happening in the past. There was a lot of interesting stuff in the past. So I just said it in the past, meaning I said it all with him 17 years old. So I think I knew the ending when I wrote that. I think I did. I think I knew that was where it was going the whole time. It probably took a while. I mean, I always knew that Ron was going to be revealed to be a creepy guy. Um, it might have developed later about the parental involvement. Um, it's always tricky if you're writing a book about a missing person to say, well, are we going to get to the end of the book and they're alive? Or are we going to get to the end of the book and you find out they're not alive? So that's always a tricky thing. But it just seemed to make sense that, I mean, where else would Chloe have been? She didn't really have a reason to run away, you know.
I think a lesser book, she would have been alive. I think I think an author could have kind of wimped out, because I kept thinking she's alive. For whatever reason, she needed to get away for a while or whatever. And I thought, that's going to be kind of lame if that's what it is, that she just needed to get away for a while and her parents were helping her or somebody was helping her get away. And then, the realism is that she was probably dead and that's what happened. But it was sad, but I was also gratified that you didn't take some kind of a easier way out.
usually when people disappear and they're gone for a couple of days, it's probably not good. I mean, because it's and especially for a 17-year-old who didn't have anything with her, where was she going to go? So there was stuff that I planted in the book, like the possibility that she was pregnant and all that maybe there was a reason why she would run off or go stay with Aunt Sally or whatever. But yeah, realistically, people are usually gone for good when they're gone.
Which I think the title fits very well based on all of that.
It did end up being a nice title after all, right? Because she's disappeared, and then once you read the end of the book, well, she really is gone. Like
really
that, she's
gone.
not coming back. So yeah.
Yeah.
Was there anything in this that you wanted the viewers or readers to take away? I know you always tackle hard things, like you tackled, I think, very well, the gay and lesbian relationship with Olivia. I liked that was in there. But is there any kind of big takeaways? I know you usually tackle heavy topic areas. I didn't know if you were going to infuse that in your YA books as well.
Well, I think I think all YA books are coming of age stories. So on the one hand, it's about Hunter having this awful experience and recognizing, you're just learning how difficult the world is and that you're not always going to have control over the things that happen to you in your life. He's already lost his mother, so he's experienced that before. And now he's experienced this. The other part of it is, and like the fallen hero thing with Ron, the other part of it is that I think is there, is so it's written from the point of view of a boy. And I think that, at least I can only talk about myself, right? When I was growing up, I didn't understand what it was like to be a woman in the world. I just did not. Maybe it was because it was so long ago that our culture wasn't as aware of some of these things, but maybe it was just because I was a young man and I was a little clueless. The story I always tell is that when I went away to college, I went to Indiana University, and Bloomington, Indiana is just like a typical college town. It seems very fun and very friendly, and it's Indiana, and what could ever happen in Indiana, right? And I remember talking once to a friend of mine who was a woman and talking about the town, and I said, like, oh yeah, it's so safe here. You can just walk around at any time of night and feel safe. I can walk around alone at any time of night and feel safe. And she looked at me like I was nuts. And she said, well, yeah, but a woman can't do that. And it was just one of those eye-opening moments for me as a young person to realize, oh, it is different for a woman. Like as a man, I could walk around at 2 or 3 in the morning on a college campus and not worry about anything happening to me, right? Women didn't do that. Even in a nice town like Bloomington, women didn't do that. We had to have women's wheels. You had to have like walk in a group. You had to have all that. So having said all that, I think Hunter's kind of in that position where he's realizing these things that happened to Chloe, having to do with Ron. It's eye-opening to him, and that's why the book ends with that memory of the time they were in the mall at the food court. And
I liked that a lot where you ended.
Right. Yeah. And so to me, that's a big takeaway, as Hunter saying, I didn't fully comprehend the world the way I should have. He didn't see Ron clearly. That can happen to anybody. He didn't fully understand the kinds of things that happened to women, like happened to Chloe with Ron and happened to the girl in the food court. So that's the more like big issue takeaway, is that. And I think that's part of Hunter's coming of age as a young guy, is to say, I have to be more aware of the complicated layers of the world. And I think he is now. I think that's where he is at the end of the book.
It was kind of a generational. My daughter isn't here today because she had a meeting, but I I wasn't given, we were, of course, when I was growing up, told to take care of ourselves and be aware and this, but not really ever talked to about the wrongs of this world, or the idea that, hey, if you think somebody's following you, go sit down with some other people and act like you know them. That wasn't ever part of the discussion. Again, we were supposed to watch out for ourselves and be cautious, but my daughter definitely has that in her background. So there's been changes along the way in how we raise our daughters and the way we talk to our friends and to the younger people about this.
Yeah, I hope so. And I do think it's different generations talk about these things differently. Like, for instance, when the whole Me Too movement first broke, a few years ago, and everybody was talking about that, I remember talking to my mom about it. My mom is 91 years old now. So she was like a spry 87 or 88 when the Me Too movement broke. And my mom is, I mean, not only is my mom from the generation that doesn't talk about anything, my mom is a very buttoned up person who doesn't talk about anything, right? So I remember saying to my mom when all this was in the news, I said, oh, Mom, did you ever have any experience like that when you were younger, And she was like, no, never. Nothing like that ever happened to me. And I was like, oh, okay. And then she was like, well, when I was first, she worked at the gas company in Cincinnati. She was like, well, when I first was working at the gas company, well, there was this man who was always like, I would go to work and he would always want to talk to me and like do this and that. And I had to avoid him because he was always like trying to talk to me. And I was like, oh, okay, I see. Okay. So it did happen to you. And then she was like, she told a story about how once when she was a little kid, she was in a movie theater and like this older man came in and sat next to her and put his hand on her knee. And she ran out of the movie theater and just like ran home. So it was like that did happen. So I mean, it's always happened. Unfortunately, it's always happened. It's just like who is comfortable talking about it. Again, I do think probably young people today are more comfortable talking about it or more aware. But for Hunter, he was still figuring that out.
Mm-hmm. I think, though, the way Olivia's relationship was treated it was just accepted. It wasn't made a big deal that she had a girlfriend. It was just like, I'm the sister and I have a girlfriend. And it wasn't, we're not going to make a great big deal about this. Instead, it's, 2020, 2023, and this is how life is. And it's not a big issue in the book that she has a girlfriend. She has a girlfriend.
Yeah, and I do feel like that is something that's different. I tell my students this because I mean, I live in Kentucky, and people think like, oh, Kentucky, that's such a backward place, whatever. I mean, I have students who just are openly expressing whatever their identity is. That it is on display. What their identity is, right? And I tell them, because I'm still shocked by it a little bit. I'm not that old, okay? I graduated from high school in 1988. That wasn't that long ago. Nobody was out. Nobody was open about anything like that. That was all, if somebody came out, I mean, they came out to the people closest to them, and it was a locked down secret. That wasn't that long ago. So it is shocking in a good way to me that things have changed that much in what seems like not such a long time, because I can remember being in high school. So I think you're right. Younger people are much more open about that and much more tolerant, regardless of what their views are about politics. I mean, in Kentucky, we have a lot of students who are religious and conservative. They don't even blink about someone talking about being gay, any of it, right? So anyway, that's all to the good.
Yeah,
I agree. Well, can you tell us about the next one? We loved this one, obviously. So
Oh, okay.
I
The
was
next
gonna
young,
say we're excited for the next one.
the next young adult book.
Yes.
I do have an adult book coming out in June. So you're contractually obligated to buy that. Try Not to Breathe.
I was gonna say you've got our full support. We love you.
Oh,
So
okay.
I was gonna say I like the YA, I like the adult books. So I was like, I like all of it. So
Well, Try Not to Breathe will be out at the end of June, and that's about the main character. They're the two main characters, but the one who is really the main character is a former police officer, and she suffered an accident in the line of duty, so she's dealing with some PTSD, which she's not entirely comfortable calling PTSD. She feels ashamed that she let her dad was a decorated cop, and she feels like she's let her dad down by leaving the police force. But her younger half sister, runs away, who's a college student, and the main character Avery, agrees to go try to find this sister. And in the process, they discover deep, dark secrets about their family that they did not know anything about. So that comes out at the end of June.
okay.
The next young adult book, which I think will probably be out in about a year, is called The Midnight Driving Club. And it takes place in a wealthy community in Ohio where everybody has money. All the kids go, or go off to fancy colleges, but the main character's family does not have money. This sounds familiar, right? The main character's family does not have money, but they're living in this town, and the town so wants their kids to do well and get into good colleges that no one under the age of 18, no one who is in high school is allowed to drive. No kids drive in this community. So lo and behold, a new student comes to the school, senior year, and he wants to drive because he's been driving where he is. And so he and the main character start the Midnight Driving Club, which is where they sneak out of their house at night. They get cars from the 70s and drive them really fast and listen to 70s music. It's like Fight Club crossed with Footloose. And you can imagine that young kids secretly driving, it doesn't always go well. So that will be out, I think, in about a year.
That sounds very interesting.
It was a lot of fun because when I was in high school, everybody did drive junky old cars from the 70s. So, the fact that these kids are trying to replicate that experience was interesting.
What was your inspiration for Try Not to Breathe?
It was it's a lot about Kentucky, stuff like that you get into in the book. They end up going to a marijuana farm. There are caves, all the things we do in Kentucky, right? Caves and marijuana. It was that. It was just the continuing interest in family. I talked about my siblings earlier. I have two half siblings. Although I don't think of them as half siblings, but they're half siblings. And that's what's going on in the book. There are three siblings. Two of them have the same mother, and then the youngest sibling has a different mother. And so it's just kind of that complicated stuff that happens within families when families are blended a little bit. Feeling like the older child, feeling like the younger child got more of dad's attention or had a better life because their parents were together. All that kind of stuff. All these and then the guilt that the main character Avery feels about having lost her career, feeling like she can't measure up to her parents. All those things is what was going on.
Okay. Well, I think I'm very excited for that one. We'll definitely get that one on our list where I've packed them through this year. So it'll be in January, probably, if you'll come back to us, is when we're open again.
Of course.
But we love having you, and I love these books. I'm like, so you have our support both on the YA and the adult front. I was like, we'll join you for both.
Okay, I need all the help I can get. So yes, that's good.
We enjoyed it.
Good. It was a lot of fun to write YA. I didn't know if I could do it, but it was a lot of fun to do. So I'm happy with the way it turned out.
I think you did a great job with it.
I do too.
Yeah, it's fun to write about young people, and their emotions are more on the surface, are bigger. You know, as adults, we learn to like try to hide things, but young people don't always do that. So that makes them fun to write about.
I think it makes them fun to read about, honestly, because we read a mix, you know what I'm saying? And so it's very
Mm-hmm.
different to read a YA book versus an adult book, especially a YA
Right.
book done well.
Yeah. Mm. Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to come back anytime.
I'll
Oh,
let you
good.
know when we get
Good.
that one scheduled, but
Good.
we'll get Try Not to Breathe on our calendar for
Okay.
January.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
Like
in
I said,
June. Yeah.
yep, it comes out in June, but I've got 30 books that I booked for this year.
Oh,
I could go ahead and put it on my Audible, so
Yeah,
it's sitting
I was
there.
gonna say we'll definitely get you, I think, scheduled in January
On
is our
my
next
Amazon
opening.
list.
Absolutely, yeah.
that's fine. That's fine.
We're excited.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. I mean, did I answer all the questions? Did you have anything else you wanted to
Bailey
know?
Phyllis, did you have any more?
I enjoyed it.
I did
Fun
too.
time.
All
Bailey,
right.
any more?
No.
All right. Thanks, David.
All right. Thanks. Enjoy the
Thank
rest of your
you.
weekend.
Happy Sunday.
Sure. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.